All right, everyone. I am Marwan Cameron. This is The Conduit. It's 3 p.m. in Kitsap County. So glad that you can join us. 72 degrees. As you know, this is our housing conversation that happens every Wednesday at 3 p.m. And in week 2, we have a special guest that joins us, Kirsten Jewell from Kitsap County. So we're going to go ahead and bring her on up. Give her applause. Kirsten, how are you doing?
I'm doing great, Marwan. Thanks for having me back.
Absolutely. So glad that you can make it. And of course, we have Jill Stanton, Executive Director of Bremerton Housing Authority. How are you, Jill?
I'm great.
All right. Well, this is the team today. This is the League of Extraordinary Folks here in the community, and we're going to have a great housing conversation. And so what I wanted to do is start off with Kirsten because she only visits once a month. She's super busy, and we missed her last month. So there's probably a few updates that she may have. So what you got for us, Kirsten?
Hi, Marwan. Hi, Jill. I'm trying to think. Time goes by so fast and so much happens. It's sort of hard to think about what's happened in the last month. I guess I did want to talk just a little bit about some work that our HEART program has been doing, the Homeless Encampment Outreach and Transitions team. We did carry out an encampment response plan at a site in Silverdale where there were some RVs that had been parked illegally for quite some time. As is our process, we developed a written plan on our approach. We deployed our contracted HEART outreach team through Kitsap Community Resources, who went there many times. We also had cooperation from the REAL outreach team that visited as well. And then our HEART coordinator was there a lot. I think we counted that we did more than 30 outreach visits to that site over the last couple of months. The site was closed on Monday of this week. All of the RVs, other than one, moved of their own volition. We provided many of them with gas fill-ups for their RVs because they had other places that they wanted to go. One RV was towed with the owner's consent. It wasn't operable. They couldn't move it themselves. So we've towed it to a secure location where we're storing it until they can complain, until they let us know that they are going to relinquish it, or I think we said we would store it for 2 months. All of the folks there have been connected with case management. I know one family's gotten into a hotel room, another one's waiting to get into a shelter. So once again, just working with as human approach as we can to help people get connected with better resources and housing than they currently have. So that was a big thing that was worked on over the last month. We
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah, for sure.
So with the family, with the RV that you're stowing, first off, that's fantastic. 2 months is a good chunk of time to try to figure something out, and we know storage costs are huge. What's wrong with the RV? Do you know?
I don't know. I think that there's some pretty significant problems with it. I'm not totally sure. One of the things that we did was we tried to locate a mobile mechanic that would come out and be able to do repairs on the various RVs that were not operable. We couldn't find anybody who would come out and work on an RV that was as old as these RVs are. I don't know if this RV is going to be able to be gotten back into operable shape or not, but we wanted to at least give the family the opportunity, if they could find another place to tow it to, or could find somebody to fix it, they'll have the ability to do that. And then they can also have access to any of their possessions that they need to, that they didn't take with them. My understanding is that our information is that they'd actually moved somewhere else in the last couple of weeks, and just the RV was left there. But we still want to make sure that if they do want to try to claim it, they can do that. We're also storing possessions for for one household who had a few things that they needed to be stored. So we're storing that while they make their transition to their next housing situation.
Oh, awesome. Thank you for that. I was just wondering, it's like, could we do a GoFundMe or fundraise or do something that try to
Yeah,
repair it?
it's a
But if it's
pretty
that far
old.
gone,
Yeah, it's a pretty old RV. I think it probably has significant problems with it. And as I said, it's really hard to find even a mechanic who will work on an RV that's older than, 10 or 15 years, because
really?
they can't find the parts for them. Yeah.
Oh,
Jared, our heart coordinator, talked to almost every RV mechanic in the county and beyond to try to find out whether, like, what was available and what was possible. And we just couldn't find anybody who was willing to even work on older RVs. So that's a big challenge.
there's a question in the chat wondering about safe permitted parking for people living in vehicles. Do we have any sites in the county? We surely need a place for people on MLK in Bremerton.
We do have a couple of we do have a couple of safe park programs that are operated by North Kitsap Fish Line, and then one by Kitsap Community Resources. I don't believe that either one of those is able to take RVs at this time. I think there is a need for an RV safe park or even an expanded safe park in the county, and I'd be interested in talking to any nonprofits that would be interested in operating a safe park.
Kirsten, that is Anton Pressinger from Northwest Hospitality. So he's
I
been
have
talking
I
about that
have
for a
talked
few
to
years.
yeah, I have talked to him, and he has this really cool idea of sort of a dispersed RV, different businesses and organizations allowing like one or two in their parking lot, and I think that's a really, really cool idea. I'm always happy to talk more with him about that. But yeah, I hope he can get that going.
Yeah, shout out to Anton for that.
Yeah, for sure.
All right, sorry, I interrupted you there.
Oh, yeah, sorry. So also, I'm just trying to think of what else we've been working on. We've been working on the Mile Hill Drive shelter project. Pretty hot off the press. The kind of the official name of that project is now the Pacific Building. Instead of referring to the road on which the building is located, we've actually given the building its own name. So it will be called the Pacific Building Project. The organization that operates the shelter out of it might give the shelter a different name. They might name it the XYZ shelter, but the conversion of the building into a shelter space is going to be called the Pacific Building. We are working on permits for that. We were able to submit our first permit for that, which is the conditional use permit, which is the land use permit, and that has been submitted. And now we're working on submitting, working with the architect and engineering firm on putting together the documentation for the next permit that needs to be submitted, which is the site permit. So that has to do with what kinds of activities we can do on the site. We're adding some walkways for people who have mobility aids, and an area in the back where kids will be able to play, and a pet area. So we're doing a little bit of development of the site to add some amenities, and we have to submit a permit for that as well. So that's the next thing that's being worked on. And then the third permit that we'll be needing is a building permit. So that has to do with the upgrades that we do inside the building. That'll be the last permit that gets submitted after the other two are approved. So a lot of work has gone into those permits getting prepared.
So just to remind everyone, housing for the county and permitting are two different agencies in the county. So Kirsten just can't go over and say, give me the permits and let me do whatever I want. So But I have a question for you
Yeah,
there, which
we're held to all. We have to submit every permit that anybody else does. We have to jump through all the hoops that everybody else does. We don't get any breaks. In fact, there's kind of a higher level of scrutiny on these projects because they're public projects, and so we want to make sure that we're doing everything exactly according to the rules and the laws and the code. So, yep.
So do you
It's
know,
a
Kirsten, how we can advocate to change some of those codes? Is it the first permit you called it a what type of permit was it?
It's a conditional use permit,
Conditional.
and
Hmm.
that's a permit that pretty much every building needs to get, that sort of looks at how it fits into the allowable zoning uses for that particular that parcel that it's on. So that's a pretty, I mean, everybody who from builds any kind of a building has to get some kind of a conditional use permit. Um, in terms of advocating for changes, I'm definitely always a proponent of people getting involved in looking at the codes and regulation that govern our our buildings being able to be built, from shelters to affordable housing. And the county is in the process right now of starting updates to the comprehensive plan. The the comprehensive plan is the broad sort of policy document that guides what changes are made, specifically to the code related to building, and land use. And there's a housing section in that comprehensive plan, that is going to be looked at over the next year or so. And I really encourage members of the public to make a comment on what they would like to see addressed in the comprehensive plan. If you go to the county web page, that has to do with the comprehensive plan, there's an opportunity for public to get involved and to comment. When Jill is talking, I will go and find that link and put it in the chat for everybody. They're looking for input as to what kinds of things we should be considering changes in the comprehensive plan. And I know that seems like a really far off thing and it's pretty high level, but it's the first step in being able to get changes made that could make it easier, or more efficient to be able to get shelters and affordable housing built.
Jill, any thoughts on just kind of building on what Kirsten is talking about here? Um, how do we? Because I don't. It doesn't sound like. Or is there anyone that's advocating, maybe BHA or KCR, to say, hey, look, you need to change these permitting rules for shelters and low income housing to make special exceptions, since this is decided at the county level or at the city level, correct? Like, can't we change the policy and then say, okay, we're going to fast track this through because this is what this building is going to be used for?
So I think that's more of a Kirsten question, but I can say, because I don't really, we're not advocating for anything specific right now, other than with the city of Bremerton, they are passing, I believe they already passed the bonus density. Yeah, which would give specifically naming nonprofits and Bremerton Housing Authority and giving us permission to have more density on projects that we're developing. So we did write a letter of support for that. But right now, we
Yeah, you
really only
actually
have.
you had to jump off early, and I was just getting to that question about that because Mayor Wheeler was just mentioning that, and so it was for like religious organizations and permanent housing authorities. So you do support it, and you intend to seek to use that as a resource.
Yes, we do.
Are there religious institutions that are in housing here in Kitsap County? I don't know of any.
Well, I
Actually,
think.
the majority of our of our shelter providers are faith-based organizations. Everything from Coffee Oasis for youth shelter, Catholic Community Services has the Benedict House, Catholic Housing Services has the Max Hale Center, Kitsap Rescue Mission, Salvation Army. Those are all faith-based organizations, and they're very actively involved in in development of shelters and services for unhoused people.
Oh, so they can use this. So this sounds like this is definitely a win for them also.
Yeah, I mean, they have to follow the similar rules as everybody else does, but the state legislature has passed some rules around church-owned properties, not making it prohibitively difficult for them to develop new projects on property that they own. I'm not 100% in the weeds on what exactly that looks like because we haven't had that situation come up yet, but yeah, we partner with our faith-based partners all the time, and they're a huge part of why we're able to deliver the services that we are in our county.
See, it's
I
awesome
see
that
there's
you're
a
here. It's
question.
perfect to circle back on that. Yeah. Oh yeah, there is a question. She says, Joe says, I sent an email asking about KHHC working group that was looking into addressing health and safety needs on the MLK block in Bremerton. Stuff like toilets, trash, and hygiene center. Matt Garrett suggested you might know something about how far the working group got toward recommending solutions. We're wanting to start up a new working group, but would like to have the insight from the previous group.
Yeah, thanks, Joe. I just got a chance. I've been out of town for a little while here and just getting back from vacation and trying to get caught up on everything. I did have a conversation with Matt yesterday, and he let me know that there's interest in this group and was kind of asking what I knew about it. Um, I'm happy to follow up with you personally and try to give you the little bit that I know, but I think the group that he might have been referring to is the Outdoor Homeless Committee of the Housing Coalition. And that group met for many years and was involved in a number of different projects, including severe weather shelter, Project Connect, things like that. I, I I don't know where they got. I don't think they were specifically talking about Luther King block that I'm aware of. Um, as with so many things, a lot kind of got put on hold during the pandemic, and I don't think that group met in the last couple of years due to the pandemic. But there might be other people who know more about the dispositions. One of the challenges is that a lot of people that were on that committee are no longer in their current jobs, and so we lost a bit of institutional knowledge of what had been happening since people transitioned on. But I'm happy to meet with anybody who wants to talk more about it. And as you know, of course, the county doesn't have any jurisdiction in the city of Bremerton, and so I'm not going to be able to speak to kind of what the legal things are that you would be able to do, but I'm happy to provide any background or support that I can from the county's perspective.
That would be awesome. We started covering the city council meetings, and that's been a big issue for a lot of the citizens is to advocate for folks in that area. And so, looking at there was a dumpster down there, but now the dumpster is gone. I think it was on private property. And then, folks definitely need toilets. And so I wrote to the mayor during the city council. And so he shot back and said, maybe a roundtable discussion. But his last correspondence is there are some groups that are working. But I would love to maybe set up a roundtable like we did at the Marvin Williams Center and just discuss that particular issue and get some of the histories. I think a lot of what happens is there are a lot of good people that are doing good work, but new people come along and they don't know what the past, what was done, what was tried. And it's like, all right, come on, let's do this stuff. Let's do this stuff. And it's like, okay, well, no one knows what was tried, what worked, or why it didn't work. Have those situations changed? And so it's just communication. Just building relationship with each other and letting everyone kind of come in and be a part of the solution. Hopefully, so I'm glad to hear that you're like, yeah, come on, let's do it. So I will definitely set something up for that.
Yeah,
For
sounds
sure.
great. Yeah, and I mean, as always, these are complicated issues because, um, you know, we're we're needing help for a population that is for people, for individuals who have a lot of behavioral health challenges, and um, we also need to work closely with nonprofit organizations that are able to provide the services. So anytime we want to, provide any kind of a resource for people who are unhoused, there needs to be an organization that's willing to kind of be in charge of or run or responsible for that project. And so one of the things that I'm, would recommend to any group that's getting started is to try to figure out who your nonprofit partners are going to be to help make these services come into, reality, because the county government and the city aren't really direct service providers. We are typically funders. We provide funding for things to nonprofits so that they can make things happen. And so we need to have nonprofit partners who want to offer urban rest stops or, toilets or whatever those things are.
You could fund something like that?
Potentially. Yeah.
Oh, man. See, I didn't know that. Hey, you're awesome, Kirsten. It's great.
I mean, I'm always willing to have a conversation about what's going to help people, what's going to help people. So I can't make any promises, but I mean, we can definitely talk about it and what that program would look like, for sure.
Absolutely. I like it. All right. Well,
continue. So yeah, so those are the two things that we, have been working on. I think the most over the last 2 months. The Kitsap Eviction Prevention Assistance Program continues to do its important work. I'm sure you heard from Matt that there's basically the program is closed to new applications. They are working very hard to get through everybody who's on the waiting list. If when we get to the end of that waiting list, there is still funding available, we're, excited to be able to open it back up if there is still funding. But the issue is that we're coming to the end of the pandemic relief funding that was given to us by the state and federal government. And we just have a finite amount of money, unfortunately. I think it's really been really clear how much need there is out there in the community and how many people are struggling to pay their rent. And this was a great sort of temporary reprieve for a lot of folks who've been struggling to pay their rent. And unfortunately, because the pandemic funding is winding down, we don't have long-term funding that's available.
So now I ask Matt every week, like, do you hear anything, nationally on a new pocket of money that might come through? Have you heard anything? Is it seeming promising or just too early to tell?
I mean, I haven't heard anything about more kind of emergency relief funding coming through. It seems like news out of Washington is about kind of longer term investments in infrastructure and, computer chip production and, things like that. So it feels like they've kind of moved on, which I think is kind of ironic because COVID-19 is still very, very prevalent in our community. I mean, so many people are still becoming ill with it and struggling with the impacts of that. So it's interesting that the federal government seems to have sort of thinks of it as being over, but in reality, many people on the ground here in our communities are still really struggling with COVID. And I know employers are struggling. People are having to stay home from work. So it's interesting, but I haven't heard any news about more emergency money coming available.
I appreciate that.
As always, feel free to advocate with your elected officials. Feel free to, I mean, that's what I always say, like, please reach out to your elected officials and let them know that this is a priority for you. You can reach out to your state elected officials. We've got some great ones here in our area, and make your voices heard. That's how they know that this is something that their constituents care about and their constituents want to be worked on at the federal level.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for those updates. Joe, what you got for us? I know you got some really good stuff for us today too. Oh, you're still muted.
As you know, it's really loud outside my window, so I try to stay muted. So I don't have any updates from the Housing Authority other than what we talked about last week, but I just emailed you, Marwan. I thought this information that was put out by the National Low Income Housing Coalition was interesting, and I pulled up the information for Washington. And do you have that?
Which email did you send it to? You
I
sent
did
it to
it to gather
G2.
together. Yeah,
We sent it to my Gmail.
sure.
Yeah, my my nonprofit email does not cooperate with my home system. So sometimes the security is so good it locks out the people that are supposed to use it.
Jill, are you referring to the Out of Reach report from the National
Yeah.
Low-Income Housing Coalition? Yeah, so that's a national report that's released every year by the National Low-Income Housing Coalition that is an awesome and very startling comparison of the cost of housing versus incomes in lower income bands. And it sort of looks at, and you can drill down to Washington State and even down to Kitsap County specifically. And if you just Google Out of Reach 2022, the first thing that comes out comes up on the browser is NLIHC Out of Reach 2022, and you can go into that report and it will show data for all of the different counties in the whole country.
Yeah, and it's really interesting. So Bremerton last year in their 2021 report, Bremerton, Silverdale area was the third most expensive, and now we are up to the second most expensive. And I think that it is based on the fair market rents, and obviously we got that huge jump this year. But still, it's interesting if you look at it. They're saying here you have to, in order to just afford a 2-bedroom unit at the fair market rent price, you would have to have an hourly wage of $33.94. And then if you go into the more detailed information, which is on that Excel file, you can locate our county, and it really shows, what the average renters make, what the affordability is at 30% AMI and 50% AMI. And it is startling because it's really, things are very unaffordable if you don't have rental assistance.
So can you kind of go over this with us, Jill and Kirsten? So, because this is the first time I've seen this document. So number 6 where?
So I'm guessing that we're number 6 state in the nation. Is that right, Kirsten?
Yep. Oh, you got it up there, Norman. Yeah, we're the 6th sort of worst in the state, in the country.
So we're at the bottom. So we're 54th.
Yeah,
if you're looking at it in the other way.
The
we're
most
not great.
expensive.
Yeah.
No.
And then Marwan,
Wow.
if you scroll down on that screen, there's a place at the bottom where you can enter for Kitsap County specifically. Keep going down. Oh, sorry. Go up a little bit. Go up a little bit. You can go by Joe. Where is it?
It's on the 3rd page, I believe.
Okay. You scroll down. You can go to Kitsap County specifically.
That's right here. There we go. See if I can.
But there's a whole sorry, I went to it a different way. Did you get to the map?
So he's just pulling up what I sent him. I sent him the PDF file. So if you actually go to the website, we can pull up more information.
If you go to the link that I sent you, you'll get a map, and you can click on Washington State, and then there's a place to enter Kitsap County, and it provides a nice, go down there. Yep, see where it says the little search bar at the bottom of where you're showing where it says Washington? If you type in Kitsap there.
Okay.
It'll give
there
you
it
the
is.
data specifically. Yeah, just a little bit easier to read data for Kitsap County that shows how much you would have to earn. So it's basically saying that in Kitsap County, we have 105,000 households. So different than the 270,000 people. We've got about 100,000 households. About 32% of those are renters. And it shows the housing wage, which is how much you would have to earn working 40 hours a week in order to afford a 0-bedroom, 1-bedroom, 2-bedroom, 3-bedroom, 4-bedroom apartment.
Let me pause there, Kirsten. So you're saying that this data is saying you need $22.58 an hour for 40 hours a week for a 0-bedroom unit?
Correct.
Yeah, but
Wow.
keep in mind that, so that's if you're not going to be paying over 30% of your income. So it's
right.
Wow.
Yeah, but I mean, still, we don't want people paying more than 30% of their income, and especially,
Right.
in these income categories. So, I mean, it is, it's startling when you look at it from that perspective.
And if you scroll down a little bit, it shows the contrast with minimum wage. So minimum wage in Washington State is actually one of the highest in the whole country at $14.49 now. But what you could afford if you were earning minimum wage and not paying more than 30% of your income, as Jill said, would be $753 a month.
Right.
So it's super good data because it's very local. It's specific to Kitsap County, and it's some of the best data that we get by this national think tank that does this analysis every year. But it is very disheartening to see the huge gap between the cost of rent and what lower income households are actually able to afford.
And I love and I haven't seen data like this where it's showing here for a 1-bedroom, if you're getting minimum wage at $14.49, you'd have to work 73 hours a week, right? So it's like I'm working 2 full-time jobs. When am I supposed to go back to school and train or get a vocation or, spend time with my children or any of the other things and don't get sick, don't get COVID, and be an hourly worker, you got a huge problem. So 2-bedroom, 94 hours, that's more than 2 full-time jobs. That's 2.5, full-time jobs. This is incredible.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And not in a good way.
And I mean, people are, not in a good way. People are they are renting places, but you can see that a majority of their income has to go to rent. And so what else are they not able to afford?
Kirsten, here it says income levels, 30% of area median income, 30,750. So that's what it is.
That would be, your screen is really small. I'm trying to see. That's what 30% of area median income would be for Kitsap County as a whole. So the full area median income would be, about 3 times that.
Yeah, I think it's 102,000 in Kitsap County, 102,500.
And so for people trying to understand what that means, what does that mean?
Well, the median income is if you took everybody earning income and put it, put it in a line, where would the midpoint of that line be? What would be the median? It's not the average, but it's the middle earner of that, everybody's income in the whole county. And then for the purposes of a lot of benefits, the federal government has determined that people earning 30% or less of area median income are extremely low income. People earning 50% or less of area median income are very low income, and people earning 80% are low income. So they use that median income as a sort of yardstick to determine how close somebody's income is to kind of the midpoint of incomes. Jill, did I explain that correctly? I just want to make sure I get that right. Wrong.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And so those are the numbers that we use to be able to say we are going to serve people at the 30% or less. And that's the majority of the voucher holders that we serve. We do have the ability to serve at the 50% or less for a certain percentage of our program. And I can't remember if that's 25% or 10%, but we primarily stick to the 30% or less.
And Marwan, for reference, for our eviction prevention assistance program, that's targeted for households earning 50% or less of area median income. So it's a way to use a shorthand to qualify people who are in lower income earning households.
Got you. And then if you go back up and look at how many hours someone needs to work at minimum wage, I mean, this really is alarming data here.
I
Thank you,
think it's
ladies, for
interesting
sharing this.
too to compare to the state. So the first column, the left column is the for all of Washington State, and then the right column is just for Kitsap County specifically. And so you can see there's some differences in kind of on a state basis versus Kitsap. And in some ways, Kitsap is a little bit better off, and in some ways, it's a lot worse off than the statewide.
Yeah, I was just looking at that, right? It's like, okay, so everyone talks about how expensive Seattle is, and it's like, well, look at the, medium incomes here. That's pretty close.
Yeah, it's not too far off.
That's not too far off. And then folks that are on SSI, doesn't matter if you're in King County or Kitsap County, you're getting 879. It's like, okay, what am I supposed to do about that?
Right,
Wow.
and that doesn't make any sense that those federal benefits are fixed, no matter what part of the country you're living in, because your dollar goes a lot further. Your $879 goes a lot further in some parts of the country where housing and food are less expensive than in this part of the country where it's extremely expensive. And then this that you're looking at here is very interesting too. This is something they've added in the last couple of years. I think it's very interesting. It looks at different occupations and kind of what the median hourly wages are, so that can compare to kind of what the housing wages are. So I think the housing wage we said for a 0-bedroom was like $23 or something. I'm trying
to. It was. Oh, let's see if I can. 20 for 0-bedroom, $22.58.
Yeah. And then it shows sort of what occupations are earning. And so you can see that it's the folks who are working in service jobs that are not earning enough to really afford housing, home health care, retail salespeople, waiters and waitresses, nursing assistants, restaurant cooks, even teaching assistants aren't really earning enough to afford even a 0-bedroom apartment. And then they have where the housing wage falls on that scale, right? So pretty much anybody, earning less than that is going to really struggle with being able to afford their housing.
Yeah.
And I mean, what that means is that, there's a lot of, obviously we have a lot of folks working in those employment sectors that are paying for their housing. It's just they're considered rent burdened, which means that they're paying more than 30% of their income on their housing. And that means that they have a lot less left over for food, clothing, transportation, childcare, all the other things that
savings, emergency fund, paying into a 401k, rainy day fund, car repairs.
Yeah, any of that.
Extracurricular activities for the kids. Yeah.
Right. And then a lot of those jobs don't offer sick time I guess now the state requires everybody to get some sick time, but often if you have to take an extended period of time, like it really, and you aren't getting paid for that time off, it really, really can impact your income.
And what's scary is it wasn't very long ago when I first started at Olympic College, they wanted you to have a master's degree to be an adjunct, and the starting pay was $19.95 an hour for requiring a master's degree. Incredible.
Yeah, so this is one of the things that we struggle with at the Housing Authority is balancing between how can we help rent burden people versus other preferences like homeless, people that are unhoused, because it's in some ways with Kitsap County having all of these underutilized vouchers, would it make sense for us to essentially target different categories than we currently typically prioritize? I've been trying to get with Matt to get a list of people who are coming off the rental assistance program, but they are currently housed, but there's going to be a long-term need for rental assistance that can maybe be provided through some sort of a preference from the housing authority.
Jill, that would be fantastic, because we do know, I think this program has definitely demonstrated what we always knew, which is that there's a lot of people who've been really struggling to pay their rent before the pandemic. The pandemic made it even worse, but at least we had some funding to kind of provide some temporary assistance. But now that that funding is gone, folks are going to go back to really struggling to pay their rent. And rents in the meantime have gone up in a lot of cases, and incomes haven't gone up as much. So if there's a way to help those folks transition onto a more permanent rental subsidy, that would be excellent.
Yeah, so that's what we're working on. So right now we've hired a consultant to go through our administrative plan, because that is what we live by. If it's not in that plan, we can't do it. So we're doing two things with that plan. One, coming up with a preference plan so that we can target and really utilize our vouchers fully. And then the second thing that we're going to do with that plan is to make it as flexible as possible. So we've had a very, I would say, inflexible admin plan for many years. And it's not that that's a bad thing necessarily. There's reasons why you would have more flexibility and reasons why you would have less, because you have to try to balance out how you use your vouchers. But in the position that we are in, we want to be able to use more vouchers more easily. So we're looking at what are the regulations that says you have to do or you shall do, and what are the ones that they say you may do. And if we have some flexibility that will help us utilize our vouchers more quickly, we're implementing those. And that's going to go to our board in September. So hopefully by early fall, we'll be able to have a better way to prioritize people in these rent burden categories.
Oh, nice. Kirsten, can I ask you a long-winded question?
Sure.
My long-winded my long-winded question is this. With KEPA coming to an end and the unlikelihood that there are more emergency funds coming through, uh, undoubtedly evictions are going to increase. Rents are continuing to rise. As you said before, we're still in the era of COVID. Um, we have other things coming along now also. And we still have all these constraints because we're so uniquely positioned here on the peninsula, being a Navy town and being a fast ferry away from Seattle. Uh, is the county or any other organizations having conversations on how to best serve the community without the financial help? Uh, are those conversations happening at all? And what would that look like?
Yeah, I mean, I think they're happening in a few different ways. The first that comes to mind is that there's a little working group that's been meeting for the last couple of years around eviction prevention, particularly working with Kitsap Legal Services, the Dispute Resolution Center of Kitsap County, Northwest Justice Project, Kitsap Community Resources as a distributor of the eviction prevention funding, the Superior Court, and the county, strategizing all the time about how to best work with people who are struggling with getting evicted, and how do we streamline the process for them and for the landlords and for the courts and for the lawyers. Like, how do we do this better to make it less likely that people are going to actually get that eviction on their record? And they've had a lot of success, actually, between using some of that eviction prevention funding to negotiate with landlords. There's been a lot of cases of what they call negotiated move-outs. So the landlord wants the person to leave, or the household to leave, and starts the process by giving them an eviction notice. It goes through the Dispute Resolution Center, Kitsap Legal Services. They're able to work with the landlord so that they don't actually get an eviction on their record, but they figure out a little bit more time to give the household opportunity to move somewhere else. So I think there's definitely a lot of work being done on how to manage the crisis of eviction as best we possibly can for people who are in that unfortunate situation. There's also conversations going on among counties and the state about our big concern about the kind of what we call the funding cliff. We've created a bunch of really effective programs that have been operating during the pandemic, and they're doing incredibly good things, and a lot of people are getting helped. But we're looking out towards mid 2023, and there's all of that money just goes away, and that means a lot of things are, we aren't going to be able to keep doing them. We're not going to be able to keep funding them, and that's greatly concerning to not just me and Kitsap County, but all the counties around the state are in the same boat. And so, we're talking with the Department of Commerce and our kind of state advocacy groups about what can we do? Is there something that we can request of the state legislature to help make that cliff a little bit less of a drastic drop? Can we slow this down, or is there some kind of other funding that could be used to cushion the blow a little bit? Because it is very concerning to all of us. We haven't seen a decline in homelessness during the pandemic. Not to take us on too much of a tangent, but one thing that I forgot to mention that happened in the last couple of weeks is we did get our point in time count data published. And I think we'll be presenting that at the next Housing Coalition meeting. That essentially showed that to some great extent, homelessness has stayed relatively flat, but we have a lot more shelter beds operating right now. So if we hadn't had those new shelter beds open in the last 2 years, we would have seen a dramatic increase in homelessness, right? So it's not that there's less homelessness, it's just that we're able to shelter more people now. And so then those shelter beds, we don't have the money to keep funding those. Will we see a dramatic increase? So to answer your question, yes, it's very top of mind. A lot of conversations happening about what to do and how to make the impact less on our very vulnerable people who are unhoused.
Has anyone floated any ideas of, talking with local employers and business owners and homeowners on maybe offering subsidies if they rent to folks that are like 30% AMI, with property tax breaks or some other incentives to keep folks housed in an affordable level? Is that even something that could be done?
Yeah, I've heard that idea floated before, like talked about before the pandemic. That was something that was just sort of like out there as an idea. I don't know enough about tax law to know if it's something where a local jurisdiction has the authority to give a tax break for something like that. If you look at your property tax bill, if you're a property owner, and you look at the bill, you'll see that a lot of the items on that bill are sort of supplemental voter approved levies that are collected through your property taxes. So you'll see that there's like a emergency medical services levy amount. You'll see that there's probably a school district amount if you're in that district. There's a library levy, there's a Kitsap transit, like there's all these different additional little amounts of money that go to add up into your tax bill, and actually a relatively small amount goes to the county government. And I don't know what authority a local jurisdiction has to waive any of that tax collection for any purpose. And so it's an interesting idea. I definitely encourage people to talk to your elected officials about it and see if it's something that might be possible. I'll bring it up the next time I have the opportunity. That might be something that the state government could get involved in. Again, not being familiar with tax law, it might be a state legislature bill that could get passed that would allow local jurisdictions to have some waivers or something. But again, I don't know enough about that.
No, that's awesome. I think in the last city council meeting, they were talking about zombie homes where they were looking at, I guess, like eminent domain, taking them over. And I don't know what they're going to do with the properties, give people fair market value for them. Do you know about this program at all?
Do you know, Jill? Okay. I don't know. I mean, I know that there's, derelict homes in all different parts of the county where the owners aren't living there and they're just kind of deteriorating. But I haven't heard of that program.
Yeah, I just wonder if we can do that with some of our larger buildings. I know we keep coming back to that, like the old Sizzler and the old Denny's on Wheaton Way that have just been sitting here for like more than a decade. It's like, man, that'd be prime, land to build a 2 or 3 story, multi-unit dwelling that could house multiple people. I don't know, Jill. Is there any? Are there like tiny homes that are built like that also? Like, when we think of tiny homes, we think of these little, what are they? 180 square feet, just really tiny spots. But building a large unit that has maybe what do they call it? Social housing, where there's common kitchens and common bathrooms, but the living space is single.
I have heard of one project like that, and I believe that there's a push over in Port Orchard for it. But I literally this week heard of it. So I think it's been kind of in the process for a while. In fact, I think that there's tiny homes and they're on a church parking lot maybe. And there's some property owner has expressed some interest in maybe using their property to have this project set up, but that's all I know about that one. So okay. Yeah, I don't know. And I am going to have to jump off because I have a 4:00 that I can't be late for. But Kirsten, I wanted to tell you, because you'll be happy to hear this, that we have 13 of the FYI vouchers and 8 of them are in houses now. 5 of them are out shopping, and yeah, it's pretty incredible. And then Bethany said she's got 13 more that she thinks we'll be asking for vouchers for. So that's super exciting to me.
I'm so excited about that program, and I'm glad I heard that you guys got to share while I was on vacation. You got to share at the state level about that program and what we're doing in Kitsap.
Yeah.
Looks like there's a quick question for you.
Jill, yeah, can you hit that one really quick before you hop off? Can BHA share about the home ownership program, explain the first 15 years of financing versus 30-year financing?
So we actually don't have a home ownership program right now, and I've really never been involved in that. So I'm sorry, I can't explain that, but I can find out and maybe explain it the next time, because it is a program people keep wanting us to bring back, and if we can, we will.
All right, I like it. Well, thank you, Jill, for coming on. We will see you next week at the coalition meeting.
Okay, sounds good. Good to see you, Kirsten. Thanks, Marwan.
Yeah, nice to see you, Jill. We'll catch up with a few other things later, I think.
Okay, sounds good.
All right, bye-bye.
Bye.
See you later. All right, Kirsten, it is me and you. So what I wanted to do is spend the last few minutes here just kind of talking about some deep dive, conversations that we want to have, and just kind of float them out there for the audience. And if they want to, submit some requests, kind of like here, the 15-year versus the 30-year would be a great one. Yeah. Jill's going to get information on. But what are some deep dives that you think would be really good for our audience to know? I know one of the main ones is like, what is your office? What's all under your office? Because it's, you do a whole lot, and folks have no idea.
Yeah, I'm excited to do that. I'm sorry I wasn't prepared enough for today. Just getting back from being out of the office, I wasn't able to put together something, but we'll definitely happy to share that and do that at a future one. Um, uh, I think maybe you've already done that for the housing authority too, but that could be an interesting deep dive to kind of learn. They do a lot of other cool, interesting stuff too, and so that'd be something interesting to learn about if you haven't already done that.
One cool
Um,
thing they did was they had their DE&I trainers come on and give the
mhm.
presentation online to everyone, which was
Oh, very
fantastic.
cool.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that was pretty cool.
I'm sorry I missed that. That sounds awesome. Um, and you know, one of the things that I don't know how to do a deep dive on this, but it's a topic that I think is one that Joe is alluding to, is that there is a lot of dependence on nonprofits to do these projects, as I mentioned, and we have a challenge in our county with nonprofit capacity to take on new big projects, and so I think there might be. I don't think I'm necessarily the person to lead the conversation or maybe even participate. I would love to listen um, about how to build capacity among our nonprofit organizations so that they have the ability to take on more programs to fill some of these gaps that we have in the community around assisting people who need help with housing. It's a pretty significant issue that I'm very concerned about. We don't have enough nonprofit housing developers. So if we want to develop a new unit of affordable housing, who's going to be the one to do that development? Bremerton Housing Authority does some, and they do as much as they can, but they can't do it all. Who else is going to, step in and be a housing developer? And that's something that we really need to figure out.
So let me ask you, Kirsten, how does that work? Does the developer build the property and then they build the city and the county after? Are they getting paid before to build it? I never
Yeah,
understood that process.
yeah, and it's a fairly complicated process, unfortunately, but it's essentially a nonprofit affordable housing developers will decide that they're going to do a project. They'll identify a piece of property, and then they'll start applying for grant funding. So typically they'll first apply for some local funding, which usually comes from the city of Bremerton or Kitsap County or both. Then they'll apply to the state for some funding, usually from the State Housing Trust Fund. Then they'll apply for some federal funding. Then they might apply for some tax credits. Then they'll go to a bank and show the bank that they've got XYZ millions of dollars, and would the bank please give them a loan for the difference and what they can raise through grants. And then once they have all that funding package assembled, then they're able to hire people to actually do the construction of the building and build it. Once that's done, some entity needs to operate the building. So sometimes that's the same entity that built it is also going to operate it and provide the services. Or sometimes a developer will build a building on behalf of another organization. And once the construction is done, they'll turn it over to that organization that's actually the owner of the building. And then there's the kind of the ongoing services being provided, or the operations of the building. Who's doing the property management? Sometimes that's again done by a third organization. So there's all different ways to do it, but it is fairly complicated, and it does take a lot of expertise in assembling all these different funding sources, and then making sure you're in compliance with all the laws.
So, I guess my thought has always been, we hear about these project managers that come out of California or other places, and it's like, okay, I've got a small construction company. We don't do project buildings or whatnot, but could the county and the city say, hey, you know what? We're looking for nonprofits local to build. we're going to come alongside you because we know how to apply for these things and do these things. And maybe we take eminent domain of the Denny's and the Sizzler so the local nonprofit doesn't have to purchase it. And then we're going to help apply for the grants and the tax credits and everything else. And then the requirement is that all the labor has to come from inside the county, which keeps the money in the county instead of it leaving the county immediately. Like the owners of Viewcrest, right? They've changed ownership a few times, but what they've done is they brought a crew in from California that just travels around and they work dirt cheap to do the work. So that money just left right out of the county. And I was like, so wouldn't that be a way where it would create some resiliency and some sustainability as we continue to build more affordable housing units? Is that something that's been thought of?
I'm certainly open to interesting ideas like that. There's a lot of different pieces in what you said that are significantly different than the way things are currently done. Doesn't mean that they couldn't be done differently. My division is not a housing developer. We are a grant administrator essentially and a strategic planner, and so we don't have any expertise or capacity in doing that affordable housing development. That's something that our housing authorities have expertise in, and that's kind of their function in the community, is to be that public housing developer. One other opportunity for a deep dive, if you haven't already done this, again, I don't know all the things you've done, but would be to invite the Kitsap Housing Authority or Housing Kitsap to come and do a presentation about kind of what their scope of work is and what projects they're working on, because they're one of the largest owners of public housing in the county. And the Housing Authority is intended to be a developer, the public developer of affordable housing.
Oh, really?
So that might be another one. That's the role of the Housing Authority, is the public developer of affordable housing. So, that's what Bremerton Housing does. They have these housing choice vouchers, which let people choose where to live in the community, but then they also develop new units of public housing that they own and operate. And so that's for the city of Bremerton, but then Housing Kitsap is for all of the jurisdiction outside of the city of Bremerton in Kitsap County. So that would be another thing to just hear more about them from Housing Kitsap about what they are doing and the housing that they already own and kind of what their plans are for the future. And they would be experts in this, like the proposal that you just outlined, that plan, like they would be able to address far better than I can how likely it would be able to do something like that, because they have more expertise.
Well, I just think it'd be fantastic because you'd bring the college in, vocationally, and so you'd have your welders, and I just could see it just helping so many folks, and then giving folks skills. And as you build, you're hiring from inside the county, and they just go to the next project and build. And it's kind of like even a hybrid of Habitat for Humanity. Even some of those folks would be building their own units, which would be fantastic.
Yeah. But
go ahead. I'm sorry, I cut you off there.
Oh, no, I know. I was just trying to think of any other sort of deep dive topics that might be interesting. I'm always, as you know, constantly encouraging people to get involved in the legislative and decision-making process. We have we're lucky to have a really good advocacy group working on our behalf, the Washington Low-Income Housing Alliance. And, it'd be interesting to have one of them come on and just talk about the work that they do at the state level to advocate for affordable housing. What kind of legislative stuff is coming up in this coming up session that people can get involved in. They have some very cool programs where people with lived experience of homelessness or who are residents of affordable housing can get involved and learn how to be advocates at the local and state level. They train people and provide support for them to do that. So that would be kind of an interesting way for your listeners to learn about how to get involved with state advocacy around homelessness and affordable housing issues. Because that's really where a lot of this stuff can change is those state and those state policies. So that's another idea for a deep dive, is kind of look at the legislative advocacy side of how people can get involved.
And
Yeah.
and do you could you steer us through a conversation on that, or know some
Oh,
people that can?
I could put you in touch with who you could invite to do that, and I think they would be probably willing to come and do it. I know, I know enough to be dangerous about a bunch of different things, but I always, defer to my colleagues who are specialized or focus in these particular areas, because they have a lot more expertise than I do. The
Well, that'd be
Washington Law
awesome for us to be able to.
is very, very active and does an amazing job for advocating for homeless programs and funding at the state level.
Yeah,
I
that
can put
would.
you in touch with somebody to ask to come and participate and give a presentation.
Yeah, that'd be fantastic. The more people that we can meet and have these conversations, like I said, there's a lot of passionate people here in the county. It's one of the more
Yeah,
passionate counties, I think,
good.
from
And
my
so,
experience.
and I just thought of one more deep dive conversation that might be interesting, is really around the eviction process.
Hmm.
I think a lot of people who are getting evicted don't have enough information about how this process works to be able to advocate well for themselves. And it's such a scary thing, and you're about to lose your housing and have this terrible legal thing against you. And I really want more people to get educated about what the process is, so that they can make sure that they're not, missing out on opportunities to not get evicted. So that would be, getting another guest speaker from probably Kitsap Legal Services to come and talk about what is the eviction process, and what are your rights as a renter when you get an eviction notice, and what does it look like to fight that eviction in court, and how can Kitsap Legal Services help, and like all of that stuff, I think would be a really useful service for the listeners to know what to do if they get an eviction notice.
Oh man, those are some really good ideas. I love it. All right, so we will definitely jump into that. Man, Kirsten, you are awesome. I know you just got back and you're not even settled in. And of course, the big deep dive is your office and everything that comes under
For
your
sure.
purview, and which would be great. Joe says so many people just move out of shame and helplessness. Very,
Exactly. Yep,
very important.
absolutely. So even though we have these sort of legal evictions that, we have numbers on, I would say the vast majority of people just vacate before they get evicted. And sometimes those are illegal eviction notices, or
Mm.
sometimes there's ways that the Kitsap Legal Services can help. One thing that this would be, the Kitsap Legal Services is way more expert in this, but our state has what's called a right to counsel. It's a new law that was passed in the last session that means that if you can't afford a lawyer yourself and you are a low income person, you get the right to an attorney provided for you. So it's not just in like criminal cases where they say, on those TV shows, like, if you can't afford an attorney, one will be provided for you, right? But that's true now for other cases as well. And so
Wow.
we're, in our county in the process of setting up that process so that people who are getting evicted do have the right to have an attorney represent them in court. So I really want people to be aware of what their rights are, and what these things that they can get access to are, to help them, because sometimes landlords aren't following the right rules. We've heard many examples of that. The landlords don't know what the rules are, or they're like maybe an out of state, big company that owns the units and aren't familiar with Washington state laws, or maybe the landlord is just blatantly disregarding the laws. But there are cases where people shouldn't be being evicted, or aren't really allowed to be evicted, and yet they're getting these eviction notices. And as Joe said, they're moving out of shame and hopelessness, even though they maybe don't need to. So I think, especially as you guys said earlier, that we may be seeing an uptick in evictions, or more people experiencing that challenge. I think it'd be really good to use this platform to help people know what their rights are.
So that was an interesting question that Joe put in there. How do we find out who's facing eviction so we might reach out to them with info about their rights? I know some of that
My
coming through KCR
understanding
and
is,
BHA.
well, some of my understanding is that the court require when some, again, I'm not an expert, so I even hate to say this, but I think the court notifies Kitsap Legal Services when they receive an eviction order. And
Oh, really?
then Kitsap Legal Services is able to help. But again, that's why you should get Kitsap Legal Services to come on the show and talk about it, because they'll be able to give you the real information. Yeah.
And I'm going to put their information up just
Yep.
so you can reach out. I'll also put the Tenants' Rights Handbook up.
Yep.
So you have that. So all these great links that I put
Thank
up every
you.
week for you guys. One last thing is, I think a lot of people don't realize what a quote unquote death sentence it is when someone gets evicted. And it's like, okay, now I need first, last, and deposit. I've got to overcome the eviction. I've got to find an affordable unit. That person has to allow me to move in based on what's just happened to me. I mean, there's all these factors, and you can go from being housed to homeless, pretty much overnight. And we were sharing the point in time count last week, actually, and because a big misnomer is that everyone is, or a big majority is substance use, and here it's 25%. Most of it is health issues, mental health, job loss, and unable to work. I mean, it's just massive,
Yeah.
and I think a lot of people have misconceived notions on why people are experiencing homelessness, and it's like, oh well, they did it to themselves, they're alcoholics or drug addicts, and it's like, actually no, the data doesn't show that. And it's not surprising that if you find yourself homeless and there's really no way for you to pull yourself out of it easily. I mean, you got folks that are housed that are hanging on by a thumbnail. How these things can develop over time. You're going to have mental health challenges the longer you stay in a homeless state. Yes, absolutely. So I really
Yeah.
appreciate that data to
I
show
always
that.
laugh when people say, well, people should just pull themselves up by their bootstraps, right? Have you ever heard that
Mm-hmm.
saying, pull yourself up? It is literally impossible to pull yourself up by your bootstraps. If you think about it, it's a funny saying, because it is not possible to pull yourself up by your bootstraps. It's not even physically possible. I think our society has a very strange way of victim blaming. We don't want to acknowledge that our social system is failing. And so instead we blame the people that are victimized by it. And that is true of people who are poor, people who have mental health issues, people who are addicted to substances, people who experience homelessness, all of that. Our society, many, many people want to blame those folks instead of acknowledging that this is a system problem that is much more complicated to fix. And I get to work with all of these amazing nonprofit providers that are the people who believe in being compassionate and in helping people, and work incredibly hard to provide fair opportunities for people to have access to the resources that they need. But boy, oh boy, I sure get a lot of people from the public calling me and expressing their displeasure that we have anybody who's homeless in Kitsap County, and why haven't we done something about that yet? And get to have these fun conversations around, like, this is a really complicated social problem. Like, homelessness is the symptom of a bunch of much more deep-seated cultural, socioeconomic, racial injustice, issues that are not going to be solved by, solved by one little division in the county government. So we need to all work on this together, essentially.
Yeah, absolutely. And and to that point, please share that information out. If someone makes a statement like that, give them the point in time count. Have that
Oh, I do.
conversation.
Yeah,
Oh, I'm
I
talking to the
try.
audience. I know you do. I'm telling the audience to
Oh,
do
I
that.
see. Okay, yeah, yeah,
I literally I was going in for back surgery a couple months ago, and my surgeon was saying, "Oh, one of my good friends built Pendleton Place." And I'm like, "Okay, that's awesome." He's like, "So is it true that most of the folks that are homeless are drug addicts and alcoholics?" And it's like, no, that's not the case." He said, "Would you say that?" Because he knows I work in this community. And so it
yeah,
gave me an opportunity to advocate on their behalf and change his thought process on that. And he was taken aback by that. So a lot of folks just they don't know, right? They consume information however it comes in, and they have their ideas, but this is what it is. And these folks are folks that work with these people all the time, so they know their stories, they know their situation. So it's not a thing of oh, this person just isn't reporting that they have a issue with alcohol or drugs, and that number's higher. It's like, yeah, no. But regardless of what the numbers are, folks need to be housed and folks need help. And so that really is the bottom line of it there. Um, Kirsten, I appreciate you coming on today. I'm going to give you the final word. Um, yeah, it's great when you come on because you bring such insight and information and resources. And so, like I said, I just want to tell you that I appreciate your time.
Thanks, Marwan. I really appreciate the platform and the opportunity to talk to the public in a way that maybe I wouldn't be able to do otherwise. It I think your commitment to having this sort of ongoing conversation about housing and homelessness issues is really important, and I just appreciate you right back. Thank you.
All right. Well, you heard it there. Next week, there's going to be a presentation for the point in time count. Kirsten, are you the one that's going to do that presentation next week?
You mean at the Housing Coalition meeting?
Uh-huh.
I'm not sure. I haven't got that actually on the agenda, but we will probably do it as an update. So it'll probably be either me or Corey who does that. But to your listenership, that data summary that Marwan was showing is available on our website now, and you're welcome to take a look at that and share that around. I think on the agenda for the next Housing Coalition meeting is a presentation on the HEART program. I think you are all familiar with that because you got a similar presentation, but we wanted to present that more broadly to the coalition members. So that's kind of what our time slot is going to be dedicated to.
Well, and I don't know if you remember or not, but the Housing Coalition gave us permission to air that meeting live. So we're actually on an hour early on the third Wednesday because we share that out to the masses now also, which is fantastic.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, I'm excited about that.
All right. So again, join us next Wednesday at 2 p.m. for the Coalition Housing meeting. And then the Pancake Breakfast is the following Wednesday. We hope that you will join us. Remember, every second Wednesday is the deep dive, and that's why you see Kirsten Jewell when she is available. A shout out to all of our guests, Jill Stanton, Kirsten Jewell, in absence, Matt Garrett, and Katie Sharp. I am Marwan Cameron. This is The Conduit. We'll see you next time.